Good morning. I'm Brenda Correa, and Elder Affairs would like to welcome Paul Halfman, Assistant Director of Community Sanitation with Department of Public Health. Paul will present on bedbug resources and practices. This presentation was part of the October 11th annual Mass Home Care Association meeting, and Paul was kind enough to come today to Elder Affairs and present for the taping. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's always nice to be able to talk about these sorts of things. Before we get started on the bed bugs, I'd like to say a little bit about our program of community sanitation. We have authority over most of the chapters of the state sanitary code. As you can see, housing, farm labor camps, camps for kids, swimming pools, campgrounds, but we also do detention centers like the DYS, local police. We go to, local police, state and county correctional facilities, indoor quality of ice rinks. A whole number of things are part of our responsibility. So if you ever have any issues with those sorts of things, you can still call us at that same place. So what are bed bugs? Bed bugs are blood-feeding insects, nocturnal normally, unless there's an infestation that gets so strong that they don't mind coming out. They're attracted to CO2 and body heat. So that's why they come out in the evening when you're quiet, and they sense your body heat, and they sense your breathing. So when you breathe and your heart pumps blood, you're causing the problem partly yourself because you're inviting them to come crawl along on you. They live in aggregates, meaning they live in very large groups, and the females are more likely to leave the aggregate than the males are. To identify them, they're chestnut brown, about the size of an apple seed when they are full grown. They're wingless, they're fairly flat, and the female is wider. Sometimes they're mistaken as ticks, but when you compare them side by side, it's pretty obvious as how different they are. They are visible with the naked eye. The eggs, instars, and adults are the three different stages. It's much more difficult with eggs and instars because they're smaller and a little clearer. However, you can pick them up if you know what you're looking for. But the regular bed bugs, full size, very easy to figure out. Now, one of the interesting things about them is their life cycle. And when you look at this chart, and you'll see they go from eggs to instars to adults, what you need to understand is before they go to each stage, they have to have a blood meal. So they will not transform from the instar to the second instar and onward until they've had blood. So they can last quite some time. The reproductive cycle takes about 30 to 50 days to maturation. And feeding, as I say, triggers not only mating but growth. Adults survive for 1 year, and instars a few months without feeding. So one of the things we run into is we will have people that tell us when a bed bug arises, they'll say that, well, we know who did it because they just moved in and now we have bed bugs. And that's one of the issues that you can't really rely on, because if it's been quiet and there's no one been living in that apartment for a while, they could just be living there and hiding and waiting for someone to show up. So it's kind of a misnomer when we say someone just moved in and now all of a sudden we have bed bugs, because it doesn't really work that way. Next. Signs and symptoms. In some people there are absolutely no reaction whatsoever. Some people have mild irritation from the bites. Some get very severe. Bed bugs do not carry, as far as we know now, it hasn't been proven that they carry any disease, so they're not a carrier. However, what most people have is a reaction to the bite themselves, and it'll be like an infection or irritation, so they can have some sort of an allergic reaction. So when you see these swells on people's bodies, it's usually from that, and not the fact that a bed bug leaves that. It's their own reaction to the bite itself. As you can see here, the bed bugs will feed on capillaries, and they may pierce several times while they're trying to find the right spot. So while you're sleeping, they could hit you several times. So if you see some of these clusters, that could just be one bed bug in one evening trying to find the right spot to hit. But you're going to react no matter what. They prefer exposed skin, neck, face, arms, and legs, but if they have to, they'll go a little deeper and crawl. They're quite persistent. And as we said, that the bites themselves can lead to secondary infection if you're scratching or if they bite on a wound or something. It is possible for an infection to take place. Excuse me. Emotional, psychological issues are probably one of the things that makes it difficult for us to deal with, because people think that they are not clean and they're embarrassed to say that they have bed bug problems. So a lot of times what will happen is they'll keep it quiet, and then it gets worse and it gets worse and it may spread. So what happens is people go through a lot of emotional distress. You can imagine what it's like if you know when you go to bed you're going to have bugs crawling all over you, and you wake up every morning and there are more bite marks on you. So obviously you don't sleep. When you don't sleep, you get agitated. And as I said, people are quite embarrassed to say we have a bed bug problem, because they think, well, then there's something wrong with me. I'm not clean. People are going to think I'm a slob. I clutter. I don't do the dishes. But cleanliness has nothing to do with the attraction of bed bugs, unlike a cockroach, which they prefer filth and grime. Bed bugs, doesn't matter if it's clean or sanitized for that matter. They'll come after you because they're after your blood. They're not after anything else. There's also one other issue we run into, and we get this now again, is the delusionary parasitosis, is where people think that they're constantly being bitten when there's really nothing wrong at all, and they may start scratching, and it makes it look like they are, but there are no bed bugs in place. And that happens with several things. They'll say it's ticks, it's fleas, it's any number of things, but there's really nothing there at all. So you're dealing with that as well. Now, do you have a bed bug problem? If you look at the mattress, that's the first place to look, is along the fold of the mattress. If you see red-colored spotting in that fold or on other resting areas, that's a good track, because the blackish-colored spotting on or near the mattress ribbing or other resting areas is a sure sign that you've got bed bugs. It's usually the feces that makes that. Live bed bugs, or you could see the skeletons left, or you might even see eggs at that point on the mattress, box spring, frames, or other resting areas. It's kind of a misnomer when it says bed bugs, because bed bugs will live anywhere. They like to live close to you, but they will live anywhere. And a sweet smell similar to rotten raspberries, we don't usually notice that really, but some people have said they have, and other people say that's what attracts dogs to it when they bring in the dogs for detection. So like anything else, some people notice it, some people don't. But if you get that smell, that's just another sign that you're running into an issue. So you can see here along the fold, you'll either see the tracks of the feces or dead, dried up bed bugs, or you'll see live bed bugs. You'll notice all the spotting, and that's just droppings left from the bed bugs. And that's really the first place you want to look. Always go to the bed first, and then you can move along from there. This is just a shot of the fact that they do live in the wood frames themselves, and people always think, well, it's mattresses only. They will take hard surfaces. They look for any cracks, crevice. You can see down in the lower right that that's some decorative woodwork, and they'll live right in that crack too. As long as they're not disturbed and they got a nice little cozy place to go, that's where they're going to go. And this just gives you a perfect example of all the different places you can look. You notice when you go to a motel, a lot of times there are paintings hanging right over. Another thing you'll see is that their bed frames, the headboard may be screwed into the wall. That's a good place, because that's going to be an undisturbed area, and they'll live all along the cracks of those things. And then obviously anything that's upholstered or cushions, they'll live. One of the things that surprises people is we have the electrical outlets. They stay there because it's warm. Also, it's like a highway for them to move from one apartment to the next. They'll crawl right along the wires. So that's a good means of expanding the problem, and we'll find them in there. We found them in stereo equipment, in the old-fashioned telephones, which most people don't have anymore, but some people still do. So any type of electronics that keeps them warm is a nice place for them to hang out as well. This is just, excuse me, a quick slide just to give you an idea of where they show up. You'll see that even walls and ceilings right in the cracks around moldings. You may not think that. Baseboard a little bit, and then obviously when you get into the softer materials, couches and chairs, box springs, mattress, it really starts to take off at that point, is where they're normally going to be found. They date back, an interesting fact about them is they date back to ancient times when there are drawings of them. So we know that they go as far back as Egyptian times. Some of the carvings on the walls will have bed bugs on them, so we know it's been a problem forever. And they spread throughout the world, via international travel and commerce. So no matter where you go, if there's all you need is one bed bug to jump on your luggage and bring it home, and you're going to have an infestation. In the 30s and 40s, it was quite a widespread problem, and after World War II, there was a sharp decline, mainly because of the use of DDT. And DDT was one of the best things that could be used to kill bed bugs. However, later on in years, around 72, it was banned by EPA because not only did it kill bed bugs, it had quite a poor effect on humans as well, and led to possible cancers, reproductive issues, so it was banned. And then at that point, it started to come back, and now where we are now, where there's an explosion again, where we find them in a lot of motels. I think you may remember that there was a story a couple of years ago about New York City theaters, movie theaters, where people were taking bed bugs home because they were living in the folds of the chairs, so they would just crawl on them and take off when they went home. So the first line of defense, as with anything, is prevention. You want to try and find a way to keep them out or contain them if you know where they are, and have a professional take care of them. We'll get into treatment in a little bit. Second line of defense, early detection. Keep your eyes open for the signs, the traces that we talked about as far as in the folds, around furniture. I know some people get very nervous when they go to hotels, that they think they're going to run into bed bugs, and they go through and they check everything, and that's the best thing to do. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about when you're traveling or when you're at someone's home, how to prevent bringing anything home with you. Finally is treatment. And treatment is really has to be the last resort. And there are a number of different treatments now, and we'll talk about that too as well. And we do this through integrated pest management. If you're not familiar with that, that's used to keep all kinds of pests out of the home. And its main goal is to knock down, reduce the population of any kind of a pest, and use the least harmful pesticide possible, and still be effective and have a smaller impact on the environment and on people. You don't give them a place to stay, as we said, cleaning, sometimes mattress encasements we'll talk about, and you know what you're bringing home with you. On your person, from work, school, movie theaters, and we were talking about public transportation. They found them on the T-lines before, especially vacation. You never know, because you've got a constant influx in rooms of people coming from all over the world, and you don't know what they've brought and left there, and you don't know what you're taking home, so you have to be careful at those points. Items from retail stores. I always tell the story that one time my mother-in-law told me that she needed me to run down to the store and pick up a mattress for her. She just bought a mattress and box spring and got a good deal on it. And when she told me where it was, I found out it was a secondhand store, and I said, there's no way I'm going to put it in the car, and there's no way I'm going to bring it into your home, because you have no idea where that is. So I made her go back and get her money back, because buying secondhand items like that is really kind of asking for problems, unless you can somehow guarantee there's no bed bugs on it. But we don't recommend anything like that. All right, bed bugs, a place to say it. We always say that they're the bugs, so we know that they are. One of the things that you can do is reduce clutter and harborage points. As we said, anywhere where they can cuddle, and it's nice and warm, and it's quiet, and they're small areas. They like to work their way into small areas. That's why you don't normally see them out in the open, crawling on tables or linoleum floors. They like tight little areas. Certified mattress and box spring encasements are the best to use. And one of the things and the reason we say certified is, if you look at the picture on the right at the end of the zipper you see a little hole. Well, that's more than enough for a bed bug to come through. The certified encasements don't have that opening at the end of the zipper. So that's what you always want to see, that has a certified tag on it. There are approximately 5 or 6 Manufacturers now, Amazon is probably the easiest place to find all of them, and you can do comparisons on them. But one of the things you need to think about with an encasement is what is the purpose of the encasement. Typically, you don't get an encasement before you have the bed bugs because you don't think about it. So what happens is the job of the encasement is to keep the live bed bugs that are already in your mattress inside and not let them get outside. It's not so much to have the bed bugs crawl into your mattress. So as we say, when you're sleeping at night on a mattress that has an encasement on it, just realize there's a bunch of little bed bugs running around inside there, so that's why you want to make sure that they don't come through any zipper holes or anything like that. So the job is to starve them out, and they need to stay on there for approximately a year and a half, sometimes up to 2 years, because we talked about the life cycle of them. So it's a long-term approach when you get something like this. Now, one of the big questions is for home visitors. We get a lot of questions on how do I protect myself. It's the same advice as it would be if you were traveling, with a couple of added things in there. Keep your personal items in the vehicle. Only take with you what you need. If you have a big bag that you don't really have to have and you can get by with a clipboard and a pen, that's the way you want to go in. You don't want to take anything with you that they may want to crawl on and come home with you. Keep it away. Keep any items away from furniture. It's easier to stand, safer to stand, but if you have to sit down, try and focus on going into a kitchen or an area where there are hard surfaces, not so much soft upholstery. If you can, or you find a way to do it, you prepare, you want to bring a small vac with you. They have vacuum cleaners that plug into the power port. It used to be the cigarette lighter of cars. Vacuum or brush off your clothing before you leave or get into the vehicle. Now, it's very difficult sometimes to vacuum yourself while you're still in a client's home. We understand that, and it kind of can be insulting to them. So if you can do it outside, so much the better. When you get to your office, if there's an area where you can change with light-colored flooring, certainly don't want to be in an area where there's carpeting because you can't see them. And the idea of the light-colored flooring is the same thing when you go for a walk in the woods and you start checking yourself for ticks. You want to find out if you have any on you, and if you throw it on a gray or dark carpet, you'll never know. So if you're on a linoleum floor, a tiled floor, anything like that, you'll be able to see them. If they fall onto your clothing and they're on the floor, you'll definitely be able to see that they're there. Take your clothing and bag it and seal it until you can launder it. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about that. And once the clothing is removed from the bag, reseal the bag and dispose of it. Because if you don't know if there's a couple stuck on the fold of that, and if you put nice fresh clothes in there saying I'll protect them, you could be infesting your clothing again. Now, when you're there and you're traveling, as we said, you want to check the bag and other areas. We talked about what you find in a motel room. You saw the slide of areas you can look. And if you look through there and you see any kind of traces, then you want to get in touch with management. You don't want to stay in that room because you don't know if they're still there. It was an issue they took care of and it's just traces. I don't think anybody wants to take that chance. So just try to ask and get into another room. Keep luggage and other personal belongings closed or off the floor. They have a lot of times a suitcase stand. That can work. We just had someone tell us that they take the stand and they stick it in the bathtub at night. That's not a bad idea either. I would say don't throw it on the floor, which is what a lot of people do. Just throw it on the carpet because there's always a spot right next to the closet. Nobody wants to take time to pull everything out and hang it up, so you just throw it on the floor. And you want to check the mattress before you just throw it on the bed. So you have to think about where they don't want to go and keep your clothes and your belongings in those areas, because if they don't want to go across hard surfaces, that's probably where you want to have your stuff. When you come home, put the luggage into a plastic bag and seal it, and wash all your belongings after opening the bag, and then store luggage in a sealed bag until next use. That'll make sure you don't get any reinfestations on that. As we talked about secondhand items, the most risky, it's just not a good idea to pick up some of those things. I always get a kick out of driving down the road and seeing all these sofas and chairs out on the front lawn with a free sign on it. and you don't know what else you're getting besides the furniture, so I would say never take anything like that. Because you don't know, as we said, infestations may not initially be evident on the items because they could be hiding deep inside. If you get a very dark piece of furniture and you don't look closely, they may be there and you don't even see them. So don't take anything from a dumpster. This sounds kind of crazy, but we find a lot of students will do that. Boston has a program that when college students are moving in and when they're moving out, they have a fleet of DPW trucks going around, and the inspectional service department goes around and they tag anything that's on the sidewalk. It's labeled. In some cases they will slash it so you don't want it, and then the garbage trucks come through and pick it all up and clean it up, because the last thing they want is to have something left over, someone else bring that into their apartment and spread the problem. It just makes it impossible to get rid of them when you do that. So just don't do that. You place your clothing or soft toys and other dryable items into the dryer. Anything that can withstand a dryer, if you can put it in there for 20 minutes at the hottest setting, you're going to kill everything. So that's probably one of the easiest treatments for yourself. Items, this is a little tricky because we've had people set their books on fire, but if you put books in an oven or something in an oven, it's a little dangerous, but sometimes that can work too. Hard furniture, it's much easier to clean with rubbing alcohol and ammonia, but as we said, there are no tight folds in there. It's easier with the solution to get into the little cracks and crevices, and that'll take care of them. So the hard surfaces that aren't upholstered are the easiest things. First of all, make sure they don't go there because they're not that crazy about it. Second of all, it's very, very easy to clean that way. If you think you have an infestation, don't panic. One of the problems we run into is that people will do one of two things. They will go to the store and buy a bomb, an insect bomb, and just let it on. Other people will just pack up their stuff and move, and they won't tell anybody. And all that does is it just spreads the problem, and we don't know about it. So, as we said, all prevention steps aid in early detection, so anything you can do to check to see if you have them, or act very, very quickly. Don't say, gee, I'm going to wait a little longer and see if maybe I get a couple more bites on me, maybe it was a mosquito. You want to act right away. If you find the infestation early, it increases the likelihood that you can knock down the population. Start by inspecting beds and other resting areas, as we keep saying. Now, if there are cases where you have to have, at a home visit or something of those sorts, where you think that there's additional help, people need a little kick maybe to get it done, or in cases where an apartment building maybe have a widespread issue where the owner is less likely to try and approach it or do it the right way, the local board of health in each community is responsible for enforcing the housing code with minimum standards for fitness of human habitation. Is basically what everybody refers to as the housing code. And also there is a nuisance statute where the local board of health, if they declare something a health hazard, it is automatically. There are no hearings or no issues. The housing code does have provisions for pest infestations and regulations for operating within the framework of the pesticide board so that things can be done appropriately. Some communities also do additional work. For example, Boston, as we talked about earlier, Boston has a bylaw now that if bed bugs are found in one of the apartments in a multi-unit building, every adjacent unit has to be inspected, and they will go to court to get a search warrant if they have to inspect those. Because as we said, when you have a thin wall between them and you've got the wiring at an outlet, they can just run from one room to the other, one apartment to the other. So they will immediately inspect every adjacent apartment. That's not a bad idea. So what local health will do is they get the complaint, they'll come in, they'll do an inspection. If necessary and they find something, they will issue an order to correct quickly. Then what they'll do is they'll come back and make sure that it was done. Now, the process in between the inspection, the order, and the reinspection usually is required to have a licensed pesticide contractor come in and help you with eradicate the issue. There are a lot of different ways to do it. It's very difficult to eliminate an infestation on your own. You can catch it early and maybe do something, but once you have a full-blown infestation, it's almost impossible to do it on your own, safely as well. So what will happen is I have in here, it says access is the key. What we mean by that is when local health comes to do an inspection, when an owner needs to come do some of the work, when the licensed pesticide applicator comes in, they have to have access to every unit and every room. So there's cooperation that has to happen with the occupants of that unit. They have to do basically whatever the pest management firm says needs to be done. If you have a lot of clutter, it's got to go. If there's some furniture that they absolutely can't treat and it's infested, and they say the only way we can get rid of the problem is to get rid of that piece of furniture, that piece of furniture has to go. Who ends up replacing that is usually between the owner, the occupant, and sometimes court, but local health doesn't have the authority to award any kind of damages or anything like that. So don't look to your local health community to help you mediate for any losses. They don't have that ability. They can only make sure that the infestation is gone and the proper people have done the work. So if you find bed bugs, you have the infestation, contact the property manager or professional with bed bug experience. When we say experience, you have to ask and do your due diligence when picking a pest management professional. You want one who's had a lot of experience with them because there's a science behind the way that they're treated. You should have at least 2 treatments and hopefully 3 treatments about 14 days apart. We run into a lot of situations where the pest firm is not that familiar with them, and they say, yeah, we'll just put down the pesticide, and they think they're done after the first application. And it may look good for about a week or so, but then all the eggs hatch and it starts all over again. So you can't operate that way. As we said, you have to clean and declutter any garbage areas, but limit the movement of the items. And what we mean by that is if you're cleaning things up and you have to get rid of some items, or you at least have to move items, that's when we talk about bagging. And you want to get those things bagged and put it in an area, or if there's a storage area you can use while they're bagged, you want to do that. They should only be disposed of under a professional's recommendation. We talked about them saying this just can't possibly be cleaned, so throw it out. But it still should be sealed and marked so that the people, if it's thrown in a dumpster, everybody knows that it's a contaminated item and they don't want to take it home. Preventative steps. Obviously, visual inspections, we talk about that all the time. You just keep looking. There are devices that help you find if you have a bed bug issue. And we have a couple pictures coming up. There are interception devices where they will trap the bed bugs if they get in. Dogs, canine scent detection, they'll come in. Commercially active monitoring gets a little more expensive, probably used more by the pest management firm, not a home remedy that you're going to do. And do-it-yourself monitors, which we're going to show you that you can use as well. These little cups you can buy anywhere, and you'll see that it has a double wall, and you put the legs of the furniture in the middle. And what you find, when you look at the upper right-hand corner, you'll see bed bugs in the cup right by the leg, and then you also see bed bugs in the other area. So what that tells you is that the bed bugs that are right by the leg have come from the furniture because they can't climb the wall, so once they come down onto there, you know they came from there. And in the other ring, where they're on the outside ring, you know that they came from somewhere else and they were on their way into the piece of furniture. So that will tell you a little bit of what kind of problem it is. They're not designed, the intent is not to exterminate and hope you can keep trapping enough of them before and they're finally all gone. These are just to tell you what kind of, or how severe your problem is. Commercial available units have CO relief, they have heat, they climb up that little wall and then they get trapped inside. These things are very expensive. But some people have come up with ideas. They get a little bit of dry ice. You take a container like this is for pet feeding, flip it over, and dry ice, because of the CO2, it draws them at night and they get trapped in there. So that's another way to see if you have a problem. So there's a few simple things you can do. As we said, though, this isn't a way of dealing with an infestation. It's only a detection method to see if you really do have any kind of a problem whatsoever. Canines have been proven to be very, very effective. However, it should always be followed up with additional testing and inspection when you have a canine come in, because what we've found over the years, what professionals have found over the years, like people, dogs can have bad days, and they can not be quite in the mood to do what they're supposed to be doing, or as they get older, their noses are less sensitive. So while they are effective, I wouldn't put my money on just them alone. You want to follow up with inspections on those. When you have bed bugs and you're going to get rid of some furniture, this is kind of an exaggeration, but you want to make sure you let people know, stay away from something like this. And it's a very big problem, very easy to spread, so you just want to eliminate it any way you can. The majority of bed bug infestations can't be eliminated in one treatment. As we said, it takes several visits, about 14 days apart, and the reason for that 14 days is for the hatching of the eggs. So a lot of the insecticides don't have a residual effect, and they won't kill new hatches. So you have to keep coming back for treatment. Full eradication of infestation may not be achievable. In other words, you may not ever be able to get rid of all of them. So you may just have to control them. If you know where they are and they can be limited or at least isolated to a certain area, that may be the best that you can do. Treatment can be very costly, but if you do it and try any shortcuts and you try to do it on your own, you're only going to cause a bigger problem. And you're not only going to make it worse for yourself, you're probably going to make it worse for other people in the building and people that come to visit you. You're going to give them a nice little going-away gift when they leave that evening. So don't try and do it on your own. As we said, you want to use the least toxic group of pest control methods possible to eliminate them because of the environment, pets, other residents may be very susceptible to some of these toxics. The best thing to do, or the simplest thing, is vacuuming, cleaning. We talked about decluttering and laundering, sealed crevices and harborage points. They have, when you look at the outlets, I know on outside walls, if you've ever felt your outlets and there's breeze coming through, there's some little inserts you can put behind them. That not only keeps out the wind, but it can keep bed bugs out, keep them trapped inside the wall. That's how you seal some of the crevices. You can use dry steam to kill existing bed. If it doesn't hurt your upholstery or your clothing, dry steam is not a bad way to go because you can do some of that for treating individual items, but you're not going to be able to go around an entire unit and treat this. So these are some steps that you can use, but you still may have to get a licensed pest management for a minute. The one thing you absolutely do not want to do is release a bug bomb. I've been in places that have done this, and unfortunately, all that does is it makes the bed bugs scatter to other places, and they'll come back. As soon as the odor's gone, they'll be back. We talked about the outlets. They just crawl through the wiring, and away they go, or they may hide in the wall for a while. As we said, they can live up to 18 months without a meal, so they're not gonna be too willing to run away forever. They'll just hang around and wait, and when the time's right, they'll come back. This doesn't kill them. All this does is make the problem worse and guarantees that you're going to spread it throughout the entire building. So never use these things. Plus, they're very dangerous to use as well. Non-chemical treatment methods, heat treatment, laundering infested items. As we said, that's probably one of the easiest things to do. An individual room or apartment heating, there are ways that, there are firms that can wrap an entire unit and they can raise the heat to 130 degrees, 120 to 130 in that area for a few hours, and that will kill most of them. But the problem you run, the issue you have to remember with something like that is you can't have a lot of clutter. And a pest management firm will make sure that the room is almost spotless and free of clutter because they put monitors throughout the room to make sure that there are appropriate temperatures for the right amount of time. A lot of clutter, there's nothing they can do. It just won't work. Cold treatment's only recommended if there's nothing else available. It hasn't been proven to be that effective. It has worked in some cases, but a lot of the things, I certainly wouldn't want to use cold treatments on any kind of electronics or anything along those lines. So it can work, but there's not a lot of good evidence that it's an effective way to go. Steam treatment is effective, but as we said, it's time-consuming, difficult to do an entire unit, an entire apartment. You may be able to steam clean some furniture, some of your clothing, but there's so many folds and things it could be a little tougher. And then the encasements is the ultimate as far as sealing your mattresses and your box spring. Most treatment methods are only effective in conjunction with other treatment methods, meaning there's no one way to do it. So if a firm comes in and says, this will do it and I guarantee it'll get rid of everything, I'd be a little leery of that because there's a combination of heat, entrapment methods, encasements. There's just a number of things that have to do to get rid of them. When you look at a room or you look at an apartment and think of all the little crevices, there's just not one way that's ever going to work for you. And it also depends on how severe the problem is. If you have a few, one thing might work, but if you have a true infestation, there's going to be a number of things that have to do. And the problem with non-chemical treatments have no residual effect or have no effect on eggs whatsoever. So that's why we talked about we would like to see 3 treatments 14 days apart if you're using pesticides, and that'll get rid of the eggs, most of the eggs. There are some green pesticides out there. Cedarcide has been proven to be one of the better ones. They have a very good residual effect, less harm to the environment and to pets or humans. Diatomaceous earth is a difficult one to use if you're not familiar with it. It is ground up shells and very, very fine particles. And what happens is it gets spread along traffic areas for bed bugs, and when they walk across it, bed bugs have an exterior skeleton, and it pierces the skeletal bottoms of their feet, and they eventually just kind of dry out because they're no longer protected on the inside. So it can work, but you're probably better off with a pesticide rather than this fine dust can be kind of dangerous if it's not used correctly. Certainly wouldn't have anybody but a licensed firm even think of dealing with something like this on its own. Pyrethroids are a group of man-made pesticides using natural products, and they will work quite well. They're introduced in the 60s and 70s, and there's 3,500 registered products, so you have quite a wide variety of things you can use. It's kind of baffling. That's why a pest management firm is the best way to go. And there's a listing right here of the best ones to use. You go to the EPA website, and they'll have an entire list for you, but to give you a place to start, at least to get going. In conclusion, prevention, the best way. Educate yourself and know what you're bringing into your home. Take the steps necessary to not bring them into your home if you can, to reduce the risk of infestation. Constantly check around. If you have any suspicion, as we said, items that you can throw in a dryer, just preventative methods. Throw them in the dryer and try and take care of it. What you don't want to use, again, is bed bug, bombs, or foggers. It's the worst thing that you can do. And don't be embarrassed because it's not you. It's something that happened that they just came along. They would much rather come along, as we said, on your items than you. So there's a good chance they've never even been on your body. They've been on your suitcase, your briefcase. If you threw a coat on the floor, they may jump in that. We find some examples sometimes in schools where kids have them on their backpacks, and they bring them to school. So a lot of the schools now are doing things like they have hooks, keep everything up off the floor. It's very traumatic for a child when they're treated as a leper almost because of the situation. There are no isolation requirements, so there are no legal means to isolate a child in situations like that. So what you do is you treat what you can, and that's where we get into isolation of backpacks and belongings and things like that, hooks on the walls, hard surfaces, things along those nature. But don't be embarrassed if you have them, you want to take care of them right away. If you don't, it's only going to get worse, and that can pretty much be guaranteed. Here's some very good sites that will give you not only product. That Bedbugs Handbook is a good one to show you the responsibilities of all interested parties. what needs to be done. Product search, you want to do your due diligence to make sure you understand what sort of product is being used or being recommended. When a pest management firm is going to apply any pesticides, they have to give 48 hours notice to all occupants, and that has to include what the product is, possible side effects like the MSDS sheet, to let you know what's going to be used in your apartment. You have that right to know ahead of time. And that's the end of the bed bug presentation. Hopefully you won't get any and you won't have to worry about it.
Thank you, Paul. Very, very informative, and we appreciate you coming to Elder Affairs today.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.